Give us just a second. Once the lights go up, we know we can get started.
Okay. Okay, good morning. Thank you guys for your patience. Welcome to December 21st, 2023 meeting of the Downtown Design Review Committee. My name is Justin Brandon and I am chair of the committee. When called on, applicants and speakers will come to the front podium to speak. Only one person at a time should come to the podium. Do not approach the podium until vacated by the previous speaker. Speak into the microphone, please, and identify yourself and provide your address for the record when you begin speaking. Address your comments, questions, and testimony to the committee. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. It is unnecessary to repeat testimony previously given by others. Citizens may address the committee on agenda items by responding to the chair's call for speakers during discussion of each item and signing the speaker's log on the podium. All comments must be relevant to the item. The chair or presiding officer may, in his or her discretion, prohibit a person from addressing the committee and/or remove that person from the council chambers if that person commits any disorderly or disruptive behavior. Please see the agenda for more information about these requirements. If you've parked in the Sheridan Walker parking garage north of John Rex Elementary School or in the Arts District parking garage south of City Hall, staff can provide parking validation ticket for you. The agenda and documents are located at https://okc.primegov.com/public/portal. You would then select the Downtown Design Review Committee meeting and then click on an agenda item, and the relevant documents will come up below the item. Keith, will you please call roll?
Brandon.
Here.
Copeland.
Here.
Black.
Here.
Jones.
Here.
Brewer.
Here.
Schmid. Here. Trujillo.
Here.
We have quorum.
Okay, thank you. Item 2 on the agenda is approval of the November 16 meeting minutes. If there are any comments or discussion, if not, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
We have Jones Blatt. Please vote. Looks like it's not coming up. Oh, there we go. Motion passes. Thank you. Item number 3 on the agenda, cases withdrawn. There are none. Item number 4 on the agenda, continuous requests. There are none. Item number 5 on the agenda, consent docket. There are none. Item 6 on the agenda, case for individual consideration. We have DTCA-23-00037 at 415 Robert S. Kirk. Laura?
Thank you. You held a public hearing on this item at your meeting in November, and it was, I apologize, we're delaying momentarily.
Oh, sorry, we have
Okay.
recusing.
I'll start over again.
Okay.
You all had a public hearing on this item last month, and it was continued. And let me just indicate the additional information I provided on your staff report. At the meeting on November 16th, the applicant's representative offered up to save two more of the concrete structures, and I had prepared an attachment that was attached to the staff report. And those structures were, if you can see where my arrow is, this one here in the street, and then the back one here up next to the alley. Also at that meeting, the committee requested the applicant provide information that shows the impact of retaining the existing concrete structures on the proposed parking lot. Subsequently, the applicant provided a revised presentation that added the location of the basement and tunnel to the existing conditions map. They stated that they would lose 15 parking spaces if they kept the middle islands, and that retaining the booths and taking out the east drive would result in a significant problem with extended cab and dually pickup trucks because the turns would be too tight. They also stated that keeping the booths and north and south cantilevers won't fix the security issues. The applicant indicated that all elements, including the north and south cantilever elements referenced above, that they indicated at the last meeting they could retain must be removed because they're supported and integrated into the basement cap, walls, and floor, and the cost to demolish will just increase over time. Based on the additional information provided by the applicant, staff did not change their recommendation, which is on the last page of the staff report, which is, if the committee determines that this site is an historic resource and an architectural resource, or that the proposed or anticipated future development does not outweigh the loss of the property, then the committee could deny the application on the basis the project doesn't comply with the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance. If the committee determines that this site is not an historic resource or an architectural resource, or that the proposed or anticipated future development outweighs the loss of the property, the committee could approve the application on the basis that it does comply with the condition, and you might recall, staff had included in the staff report, if it's approved, there is a condition dealing with sidewalks when they cross over a drive, and I include that wording, which is the sidewalk takes priority over the parking lot, entrance, exit drives. The elevation of the sidewalk shall remain constant, and the entrance, exit drives designed to angle up or down to meet this elevation. Also, the sidewalk will need to be demarcated in some way across the drives. This can be done with color, texture, or lines indicating the east and west edges of the sidewalk. So do you have any questions
Any questions
for
for staff?
staff?
Okay, any
And-
questions? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, the applicant and their representatives are here,
Okay, perfect.
and they have a presentation, and just tell me when you want me to pull it up, and I'll let you
Perfect.
drive it.
Okay. Good morning. David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. So at the last meeting, we had a bit of homework to go back and do, and so what we did was we re-engaged our engineers to figure out what it would look like to keep those middle teller booths. And what it equates to is a loss of 20% of our parking. When you couple that with the removal of that eastern drive, you lose functionality of flow of cars through that parking area. I think it's important that we, again, kind of look back to the staff report. When we talk about this particular architectural style, what you see on page 11 is that it was a short-lived movement. There's a reason it was a short-lived movement. Movements that are classic, movements that are great, don't tend to be short-lived because we tend to celebrate them and we want to replicate them. When movements die after a short period of time, there's probably good reason for that. When we think of preservation, preservation for the sake of preservation doesn't really get us anywhere. When we view buildings as sculpture, we lose our functionality. There have been buildings in the city that have been lost, and although that may be problematic, I don't know that we can put it towards this. Because when we think of preservation, we really need to think of what is an adaptive reuse of the building. This is not a building. These are former teller booths that are oriented in a north-south manner. They're not fairly visible from the right-of-way, and there is no adaptive reuse that I could see that you could make of these. Now, at the last meeting, we talked about the ability to keep that north and south cantilever. We got with our engineers and we got with the demolition folks, and based upon the way that the subterranean portions of the building are organized, we can't keep those. Now, what we are still willing to keep are what you see at the drive. So all of that stuff that's front-facing on Robert S. Kerr, as well as those panels on the west side, we are willing to keep, and we will keep those. You're going to hear through this presentation why, because of the subterranean, we just can't keep that north and south piece. But the retention of the portions that are at the drives are the most front-facing. They are what people along the right-of-way see, and we think are the most important pieces. Staff had mentioned that one of the alternatives in the report are the condition if the staff or if the committee were to approve this, and we do agree to that condition. As it relates to the sidewalk piece. So we agree to that condition. I'm going to have someone from the museum come up and walk through what we've done since the last meeting, but we do ask for your approval. We've tried to look at this every way possible to see if there was a way to retain that inner portion, and there's just simply not. We lose 20% of the parking, and we lose all functionality with flow of the traffic through that space. So with that, if there's no questions of me, I'll turn it over to the museum.
Any questions for applicant? Okay.
Are you, okay.
I'm Michael Anderson, 415 Couch Drive. I'm the president and CEO of the Oklahoma City Museum of Art. Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to walk through a short presentation that elaborates on a few of the things that we talked about last week, both the underground structure that our attorney alluded to, but then also the tellers themselves, because there was some discussion of though it's not the purview of this committee, that you're trying to figure out, is this something that can be saved? What's the condition and status of the facility? So I'm going to walk you through that, just so you get a sense of what we're talking about. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just,
Okay. And so this is, of course, again, this is 425 Robert S. Kerr. The first thing that I'm going to point out about this facility is that though there are brutalist elements, this isn't proper in brutalist architecture, because what you're seeing are tellers that are booths that are fit under and within concrete cantilevered structures. So if this were a conventional brutalist structure, a monumental or important brutalist structure, these tellers would be built into and use part of that concrete as part of its structure, and that's not the case here. These are essentially, you'll see, these almost look like, it almost looks like a camper that's sort of set within these concrete cantilevered structures. So it's different than the traditional brutalist architecture. So we're not talking about, whatever we think about brutalist architecture as a style, this isn't conventional brutalist architecture. This is one of the teller booths. You'll see a couple of the others. This is the condition that they're in. And this is why we think it's imperative for us to tear down these teller booths. So first, this is not quality construction architecture to start with. We don't see there being an adaptable reuse. But then these are also not safe spaces. You'll notice that this facility has been broken into. This is not a safe place for anybody, for people that are parking there, but then for also the people that are breaking into this space, people that have used it over time. This is not safe for them. So we think it's important that we do eliminate these underground structures. So you'll see, again, the condition. And this is the condition of the property that we purchased. It hasn't become this since we purchased it. This is the property that we purchased, knowing that we wanted to reuse this site eventually for a new museum structure. Here you see some of the ceiling paneling. Again, this is the condition of another one of those teller booths. A third one of those, you can see that, essentially anything that can be taken or extracted from this facility has been over time, over the course of its disuse. And it's been disused because people no longer bank in this way. Think about that. It's a drive-through only bank, and that's not the way that people bank anymore. And so it hasn't been used since, for the last 8 years. These are the restrooms downstairs. Again, this is nothing that we've done. This was the condition of the facility that we purchased. You see the office and the break rooms. You can see that people have slept down there. Again, this is not safe for anybody that's sleeping in that space. So the green highlighted area is the underground structure. So those teller booths are what lead you down into that underground structure. And what our proposal is to demolish the tellers and the underground structure. And as David mentioned, we got with our engineers and discovered that we couldn't do that without removing those north and south cantilevered structures that we discussed as a possibility of saving last week. We can still save the two arched ones on either side of the property. And those are the ones, again, the structures that are most visible. And what we're talking about, again, is this is not a brutalist building. These are brutalist design elements on a functional mid-century building that no longer can serve that function. So as David mentioned, if we take out the drives, if we do the drives that we think are the best use of this, so one on the far west and then one in the other building, if we take out that other drive, we lose the functionality. What David didn't mention is, so we're losing 15 spaces kind of off the hop. Well, if we were then able to, if people could drive through the tellers from one side to the other, we would lose an additional 18 spaces. So at that point, we are really getting a bank that no longer, a property that no longer has that functionality either has the functionality as a parking lot, or we really can't make any money off of that property. And again, there's no adaptable reuse for the underground structure. And it's not safe. That's the biggest thing. As we discussed, as we brought to you last month, we had an assault on that property not that long ago. We have had people that have slept on top of those teller booths. This is not a safe property, and that's why people don't want to park there, and it's understandable. There are lots of other parking options downtown, and we don't like to have that level of unsecurity so close to the building. And then we have this underground structure that we're trying to, and that we've been successful in blockading, but still, we don't want people to get under there. It's just not safe for anybody, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create a safe structure and a structure that can help us get to that next step, because this is for the museum all about being able to expand our property. As we discussed last month, our collection has doubled in the last 20 years. We have so much opportunity to grow as an institution, and this is the place for us to grow. And so we want to have a safe, functional property until we get that opportunity to grow, which we think we can do in maybe about 10 years from now, and maybe at our 30th anniversary in 2032. There are some opportunities and options for us. We're not there yet, but that's ultimately what we're looking to accomplish. So again, we would need to destroy all of those elements except for the two cantilevered structures on the far west and east side of that property. We would demolish the below ground to create a safe space for everybody. And, and that's again because of the fact that it's supported and integrated, and of course our cost goes up over time. We are a nonprofit, so that is something that we do need to be very cognizant and conscious of. So that's all that I have, Laura.
Okay.
So I don't know if there are questions.
Do you have any questions for the applicant? Any thoughts?
I have some questions. So, whenever we talked last time, there were a couple of things that I thought we walked away with. One, we agreed that the teller booths themselves are not the part of the fabric that we were thinking was important to retain. So the booth portion, we said, that could go. That could be gone, and that would eliminate something that somebody could break into, something that someone would sleep on top of, and then when those go away, access to the tunnel itself. The other thing that we were wanting to try and achieve was seeing a parking lot that showed this is how many spaces we can achieve. So I'm going to share, I didn't see that initially, and in the absence, I created one myself. I want to share this with you for consideration from your engineer, because you have 76 spaces, and I'm showing you an option with 76 spaces. With the same size parking spaces, 9 by 18, the same clearance behind, 24 feet, the same drive aisle configuration of 22 feet, the same alignment with the east property on the south portion of the property, and the same handicap spaces. In your write-up, you say that in order to demolish the structure, it's $250,000-ish, and to put back the new construction, it's another $250,000, a portion of which would have to be all of the earthwork that would have to be imported and put into the site before the parking lot could be built. And that earthwork would have to be put in, designed in a manner to support a building that we don't yet know what it is, because we understand from the renderings that there's a desire for a really big, nice structure, which I said in the last one, I'm in for the long game. I think that that's probably the highest and best use. But in this particular instance, if you can keep the same number of parking spaces, keep the revenue, eliminate the buildings that are creating the places for people to hide and sleep upon, save $250,000 minimum, and there's some options for you to consider. And I share that only for the purpose of, that's what we were hoping to have the discussion about, was how to maximize the space. So I offer that for your thoughts and consideration.
Well, I mean, I don't even know how I'd begin to evaluate
I understand
your
that.
image. This is highly unusual.
I don't disagree.
I've appeared at this podium for 15 years, and I've never had someone advocate for an alternative position with an exhibit from the Horseshoe.
I understand. I know that it's an anomaly. I did not think, I thought that we would see something that would be, hey, here's you brought, so.
So SRB, when we went back and got with them and tasked them with, is it possible, they put their engineering wizardry to it and came back and said it's just not possible to achieve what you need to achieve because, one, you lose the number of parking spaces, and two, you lose all functionality when you close that easternmost drive. I'm not sure who drew yours.
I mean, the tellers seem to be in a different spot on this drawing than they are in reality on the site.
Yeah.
I don't understand what we're looking at.
So the underlying drawing is from the presentation that was provided last month. The underlying drawing is from the packet. The red lines are the overlay, and then the three-dimensional is just showing it in the surface area. So that, and again, the challenge that we have is we can't reach out to you or your engineer. That's not something that we're allowed to do. Again, it's if you are able to save all of those costs and still retain all of the revenue for consideration.
But this doesn't appear to be accurate. When I'm looking at what SRB has produced in terms of where structures are currently located, it does not match the drawing that you've provided.
No, it doesn't. That's what I'm saying. If we were to look at,
Laura, are you able to pull up the applicant's rendering of the underground structure on our screen right here?
The one that has the
Well,
green underneath
the green
it?
bar is the one that would
Correct.
be helpful, yeah.
Yeah, hang on a second.
So in SRB's site plan, there's a 22-foot drive that widens to a 24-foot drive to accommodate the backup space for one parking space. That also shows the relationship of the concrete structures.
Now, the one thing I will say, no, I do see him. I thought some stuff was missing on the one up there, but it's not. I see him now.
And I don't know if you are able to see this, but I also see these blue kind of squares. I know this is probably hard to see on this. There are also these kind of blue squares that kind of note where the existing
Walls around the perimeter.
walls around the perimeter are. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure are they scaled? I mean, they look awfully thin.
And
And would an engineer do this?
and so the parking,
Well, what I'll say is those blue squares are on top of the ovals, which is what
Well, I
the
understand,
engineering firm, so he's locating them on top of where the engineering firm said that they were.
Well, I understand, but
I'm happy to share this.
it does not appear to be scaled.
and the parking spaces themselves are oriented east-west, so I don't know how you would get into any of these parking spaces if you see where the cantilevered structures are, because if you see that I mean, there's no drive seemingly through the structures to accommodate all these parking spots.
I'm happy to share. Let me ask this question. If SRB is able to confirm the parking lot can work and accomplish the number of spaces and not require the demolition, if they come back and say that does work, does that change anything? in the
They've already
presentation?
said it doesn't.
I don't know. Why don't I talk to, I know there's a host of people here in
Sure.
support of what we're
Sure.
trying to do, so why don't we maybe let the committee hear from all those supporters and let us talk over here.
Sure. Is there anyone else in the gallery that wants to speak on this?
There's a whole bunch of people that
Perfect. Okay, so just confirming that we are limiting comments to 3 minutes. We're not repeating testimony that has already previously been given. And then just make sure that you speak to the microphone, identify yourself, provide your address for the record that's on our podium, and make sure that all comments are relevant to the item. Is that good, Laura?
Yeah.
Perfect.
great. So, and I don't know what order they're listed, so they can come up in whatever order. Just make sure your name's on the list, because I think people were already signing up before the meeting. So does somebody want to get up and speak, or?
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Frank Hill. I'm a current trustee of the Oklahoma City Museum of Art. I live at 710 Northwest 41st Street. I'm a resident of the city of Oklahoma City. I've spent most of my recent professional career as a lawyer representing owners of real estate that the city of Oklahoma City agreed to assist in order to foster historic preservation and economic development. Oklahoma City is renowned, and I'm talking about legendary, in this country for its innovative and trustworthy local government and its willingness to enter into public-private partnerships that will incentivize investment, generate growth, and economic benefit for Oklahoma City, and in particular, downtown Oklahoma City. I had the good fortune to work on both the Skirvin Hotel and First National Center, which are the bookends for the entire downtown growth and economic development. We could not have done either of those projects without a public-private partnership, very cooperative with the city of Oklahoma City. And I will tell you that the Skirvin was difficult, and it paled in connection with the First National Center, which was a 7-year project from start to finish. And everyone became very, very connected, and we met with the city almost weekly to make certain that it worked, and we did it. And it was not a burden to do so. We worked together. And I do think it's important that you understand also that the history slightly, I know this is 3 minutes, but this project never has received any kind of public incentives or dollars. This was acquired as an abandoned property from the Oklahoma City Museum of Art. Many years ago, the first MAPS project, there was polling, and we were 11th in a field of 10, so we did not get into the first MAPS project. Nonetheless, and because of the perseverance of our incredible leader, Carolyn Hill, the museum raised private funds to buy this abandoned property from Okura. And we worked together, and we designed everything. We raised over $50 million in private money to build the museum, retaining important historic components, the Center Theater. But we had to gut the entire building to make it work. It was not at all viable. It was not functional. So I think the visionary landmark for almost 30 years has been the Oklahoma City Museum of Art. It's an incredible institution, and we've generated massive visitation and tourism in the city of Oklahoma City, and we are going to go further. Now, I will tell you that the parking lot is certainly critical. Private donors furnished money for that. We raised money. We have a fiduciary obligation to our donors to act in good faith and properly for their benefit and for the benefit of the museum. And I am going to tell you that we have obviously a strategic plan for the future. We didn't buy those lots to the north for a lot of money.
Just wanted to let you know that you're at your time.
Pardon me?
Wanted to let you know that you're at your time.
Yeah, I know I am. So anyway, you said you wanted to learn some things different, but anyway. Very quickly, my view, just looking at all of this together, forward, not 3 weeks or 5 weeks or 6 weeks, but 10, 20 years, kind of like what we've done with the arena vote. This is for generations. It's not simply for people that's on the ground today. Here's what I think should happen. I would ask the DDRC to unconditionally approve demolition of the remaining structures for the following reasons. None of the remaining structures are listed or qualify for listing on the National Register of Historic Places or as endangered significant properties that qualify for listing. The so-called brutalist architecture structures still standing could be photographed and retained in the archives of the city of Oklahoma City and Oklahoma County and the state of Oklahoma for all time. And there's precedent for that. Certainly the Union Station, bus station, and the Devon Tower, which I worked on for 6 years. We did retain the signage, and so it was a tip of the hat to the history of Oklahoma City. It did not constitute an impediment. The remaining structures, as stated earlier, are contaminated, dangerous, and are wholly incompatible with the public safety of visitors to the museum and the surrounding area. And we have asbestos abatement that is extremely dangerous that needs to be taken care of. The museum is prepared to commence demolition and cleanup of contaminated areas as soon as a demolition permit is issued. This cannot wait. This is a part of making this property usable for the future, not just simply as a parking lot, but for possible expansion of our museum and higher levels of excellence. Further delay deprives the museum of much needed revenue from parking in order to sustain economic health after COVID closures and reduced visitation. We have had a tough time during COVID, but this group has stood tall. This group of trustees and our leadership has been spectacular. So please continue the momentum established by the arena approval last week and vote to support a wonderful expansion project undertaken by one of our city's finest institutions, the Oklahoma City Museum of Art. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the gallery?
Hi.
Morning.
My name is Karen Delaney. I live at 1608 Ashling Drive in Oklahoma City. I'm a private citizen. I moved here, I'm a trustee of the Oklahoma City Museum of Art. I moved here from the Northeast 21 years ago, and I was inspired to agree to move here because of the Oklahoma City Museum of Art. I think I'm very much an appreciating person of architecture. I like the structures that we're keeping. I have viewed and photographed this property. It is a nuisance. It does not benefit anyone. I think if you're talking about the benefit for our public, that access to our Museum of Art is much more important than retaining those few structures that cannot even be seen from the street. And I feel our museum contributes to the public in so many ways that we need to expand access to our museum with further parking or perhaps an expansion of the museum in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
When one speaker finishes, the next one can get up, or maybe people don't want to, is there more people that want to speak? No? Is that it? Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay.
Do you have any further? Okay. Go ahead.
Maybe what I do is have everyone that's here in support of the demolition just stand up, so we're not
Perfect.
repeating testimony and we're being mindful of your time.
Thank you.
So that's our presentation. Again, preservation is important when there's a chance to repurpose it. This would be preserving it just to be able to look at it. And this isn't sculpture. There's no possible way that this former teller structure, former cantilever, could possibly be repurposed into anything. We are keeping the pieces that we think are the most front-facing, the ones that the traveling public will see, and that's what we're asking you to do, is to approve our application, eliminating the drive, retaining the structures along Robert S. Kerr, along the west, and allow us to continue the momentum that we have.
One question for you. I know last meeting that we discussed, in this meeting as well, that we've discussed security issue, that the unhoused or potentially are on that north side of the site have been getting into the tellers' spaces. And I think one of the items that we also asked for was, excuse me, any type of lighting. have we discussed any type of lighting, or was there anything that was
We
brought
discussed
forward?
that at the last meeting, and what they had indicated that I pointed out was under lighting, under the concrete, they're talking about lighting under the concrete structures that they're retaining. I think one of the committee members brought that up because they commented that they were surprised they weren't seeing typical pole parking lot lights proposed. So currently, none of those are shown. They can always come back and add that.
Okay,
But I know you all brought that up at the last meeting.
sure, yeah, and especially as we talk about, the unfortunate assault on site, and, this being a little bit of a nuisance, just want to make sure that, as this is brought to committee, that we have some type of lighting package or, any thought process on how to eliminate the security risk.
And we're happy to, work with staff as we move forward, assuming we, get the ability to demolish on what type of lighting staff would view as most appropriate.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Good morning. I'm Jack Madden. I'm the operations director at the Oklahoma City Museum of Art. I at 415 Couch Drive. Been working on this with the city and everybody here with the just to get this demoed. As far as the lighting package, we do have a plan. As Laura said, we are going to add wall pack fixtures underneath the four cantilevered structures that we're going to keep. We are going to repurpose a existing light pole in the center of the property between the two lots, and we're also going to add a light pole inside of the west island. So that should help address the lighting issue. We're also going to retain and re-aim the fixtures that are along the north alley as well, and coordinate that with OG&E. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Any other comments?
I do have one question, actually. Apologize for missing last month, but is there a timeline for this project?
In terms of the demolition?
Or how long it would be a parking lot?
Well, you heard Michael say, I mean, the goal is to raise funds and begin the process of looking to what the future would be. The timeframe on demolition would be immediate. It will be a process to raise the money necessary, but the whole goal in acquiring this site is to be able to retain the museum downtown, to be able to expand in this location. The museum believes it's very important to be at this location, to be downtown. I think it's a massive amenity to be downtown Oklahoma City, but there are certain exhibits that we cannot get based upon the space that we have. And so acquiring this was obviously strategic based upon where it's located. So in order to be able to look to the future, we need to be able to remove the impediments.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I was not here last month, and usually when I look at proposals, I know that our responsibility and the reason that the City of Oklahoma City created this review board is to try to maintain the consistency and compatible architecture that currently exists within the city. We wanted to make sure that we kept the feel and the history and the architecture as part of our city structure as it grows. The concern that I hear, and I am not familiar with the architectural style that we're talking about here, but I am a huge supporter of property rights, and when a property owner, whoever it is, comes with a proposal that meets the requirements that we feel we have to make sure are in compliance, then I lean in the direction that if they feel that there's changes that maybe does not or is consistent with maintaining a certain architectural style, you have to give them the benefit of the doubt that they take the input and the feedback that's been presented and they try as much as they possibly can in order to include that in whatever final designs that they come up with. looking at the proposal, and I wish now would have looked at the meeting video from the last month, I feel like there's been an effort in order to make that happen. So for me, I've not seen or heard anything that indicates that there is some historical or preservation requirements that we would need to consider as part of the consideration of the application. So I would lean in the direction as you move forward in trying to develop this property, both short and long term, that we move forward with approval.
So am I entertaining a motion?
So just as a reminder, staff has a couple of suggested motions. There is one for what you just stated, Gary, if that's what you intended to do.
So if I could, before I made the motion, because I did not hear all of the debates and the comments the last time around, I wanted to state that that was the direction I was moving in, and to hear if there were others that had a different thought. Otherwise, I was planning to make the motion that you had given that recommended approval based on the changes or modifications.
With
We do agree to the condition as well. in that.
Yes, that is correct. So with that, to move forward, then I will make a motion that we approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in sections C and D of the staff report, with the conditions that the applicant obtains a variance from the Board of Adjustments.
Oh, stop.
Oop,
You grabbed the wrong staff report.
ooh, excuse me.
Katie, can you see if he's on the, so this is 23-00037.
Ah, I did.
Okay, great.
Sorry.
Disregard what he just said.
Okay.
Let's start over on that.
We will, and I apologize because it was not at the last meeting. I'm trying to catch up, and I had the other one up. I make a motion that we approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in section C and D of the staff report, with the conditions that the sidewalks take priority over the parking lot entrance and exit drives. The elevation of the sidewalk shall remain constant, and the entrance exit drives designed to angle up or down to meet the elevations. Also, the sidewalk will need to be demarcated in some way across the drives. This can be done with color, texture, or lines indicating the east and west edges of the sidewalk.
Mariana Sarur, de second.
Okay, please vote.
Okay, whoops. I need to move. My screen just went black, and I want to.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Okay. Let me bring Eric back, and then Trey places. Perfect.
So if we can
Thank you all
pause,
for
just, yeah,
coming.
if we can pause just a second while they leave.
Yep. Thank you all for your time today.
Thank you. Okay, so just, it's the 5 of us?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
I think we're good.
Okay, next on the item for individual consideration is DTCA-23-00060 at 1135 North Hudson.
So just to recall, you all had a CE easement closure several months ago. that included this property, and so there was some discussion at that time about the proposed maps for Family Justice Center, which is what you're getting ready to see. Currently, it's located across the street to the east. It's operated by Palomar. And so the current site has the Midtown Mutts Dog Park on it, and so it will be removed. There are two variances that they need. One of the things that I will bring up is, while we're looking at these pictures, is along Park, which is on the south side. Previously, there was a CE and vacation, and so the width of the road, curb to curb, is the actual right-of-way. So instead of the right-of-way being back from the curb a distance that where you typically would have a sidewalk and your streetscape, all of that's going to be on private property. And so what that does is that pushes the building back further than your 10-foot, and so that is, and I discussed that in the staff report. And so this is literally in the middle of Midtown. Across from it, there's some commercial, there's some small, some apartment buildings. We've got restaurants in the area. This one I like because that's one of the new buildings in the background there that you all, at 11th and Hudson, that you recently approved there. Well, sorry, staff, I think, approved that one, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, so we have it under construction. We've got all kinds of new projects going on in that area. And then we have some renovation of some smaller buildings. That's to the south, across the street, retail building. So let me go back to this. So the MAPS 4 included a $42 million facility for the Family Justice Center, and that dollar amount could be wrong, but that just happened to be, it was in the article that I found, which will be operated by Palomar. And as I said, they're currently across Hudson to the east in a temporary facility. Palomar assists victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, elder abuse, human trafficking, and supports children exposed to trauma. And then I went through the history of everything from Midtown Mutts was approved back in 2013, so it's been there for a while. Some of you might use it, I don't know. And then in 2014 was when they started all the closures to do the vacation on Park. And June of this year is when you saw the CE to close the alleys and to clean up some stuff on Park. And so the other comment I'll make is signage is going to come in later. They weren't ready with the signage for this project. So one of the things that they don't meet is the minimum height of 2 stories or 30 feet on all street frontages. And so on Park, they have, at the Western Inn on Park, they have a 1-story component to the building. Well, what's in that building essentially is they really only have to screen it, site-proof screening. That they'll have their trash room there and other things, but instead of just putting up a wall to screen it, or they could actually do it with stockade fence, they wanted to include it with the material of the building, and it actually is part of the building, and it is a 1-story with a roof building. So because of the way they determined that we want to conceal these and we want to make it look nice, staff is totally in support of this. Yes, it is on a public street frontage. That's a one-way street. It's not on the primary street frontage. It's clearly not on the primary facade at all. So staff is supporting that. The next thing deals with the setback that I mentioned when we were looking at the pictures. So because the road was vacated and it's curb to curb, I mean, the sidewalk will eventually have to be in an easement to allow the public access because it's going to be on the private road. We want them to have a very inviting streetscape. They were showing there on the south that they were going to potentially have a coffee shop, so they had some outdoor tables and chairs, which really activates the streetscape. They wouldn't be able to do that if their building met the 10-foot from the curb. So for those reasons, their building is going to be set back 10 foot 4 inches, so they're not that far off at that end, but to 18-foot 9. But because of everything I just said, staff totally supports the variance that they need for that setback. And the last one is a guideline, which they don't need a variance from the Board of Adjustment. You, the committee, is the one who approves that. And so there's a guideline for first level to have 50% glazed openings. So when you have a facility like they have activity inside where you don't want people to be able to see in, that you can't. One could equate it similar to medical offices where you don't want the view from the street. And so there are areas where they have large amounts of glass. The second and third floor, they have large amounts of glass, but on part of the first floor, they don't. And so staff is supportive, especially because when you look at the design of the building with all the large amount of glass on the second and third floor, to me, it kind of balances the whole thing out, and the whole structure works really well together. So staff is actually recommending approval of this with the conditions that they obtain a variance from the Board of Adjustment from the regulation requiring a minimum height of 2 stories or 30 feet, and from the regulation requiring the first 2 floors be at or within 10 foot of the street right-of-way. And then there will be a second motion. If you agree with that, you'll need to make a motion about providing a recommendation of approval to the Board of Adjustment for those same 2 variances, and I have all that wording listed there. We do have the representatives from the architects team here, and we have a maps person that's here as well.
Okay.
And if,
Any questions for staff?
and they have a presentation, so let me get to that.
Okay.
Square's big enough, but it's in a glare, I can get it. Oh, okay, that was weird. There it is. Do-do. Yep. Okay. Now, Keith, where do I go to get full screen? Oh, you're gonna do it for me.
That's awesome.
Okay, so you just pull the rolling bar.
Thank you very much.
Hi, good morning. My name is Daniel Hayes from Orford Hall Monaghan Morris Architects, just based in Bricktown. I am here today to give you a quick presentation on the Family Justice Centre. There's quite a lot to go through here, so I'll move relatively quickly. But I think it's important for you two guys to understand exactly how the building was conceived and designed, so you can understand why it looks the way it does. As Laura mentioned, Palomar provides mainly services for victims of domestic violence, and Oklahoma has currently the worst rates for domestic violence in the whole of the country, so this is a facility that's very much needed. As also mentioned, the site is directly opposite their current facility on Hudson. We started this project by consulting with all the different partners that work with Palomar. That's a lot of different people. So there's about 20 partners that work with Palomar and have facilities within this new building. So we first of all sat down with all of them, introduced who we were, what we were doing, and understood their hopes and dreams for this new building. From that, those initial consultations, we came up with these 8 sort of key strategies for the building that everyone sort of bought into, and we've gone back and checked throughout the design process to make sure that we're hitting these targets. The first was a 21st century building. If you've ever been to Palomar's existing facility, there is very little natural light. It's pretty depressing. So the first thing is to provide a building that's fit for purpose with lots of natural light and volume. Safety and security is obviously vitally important to this building. This needs to be a facility that's welcoming and open, but also incredibly safe for people when they enter it. Connection to nature, a very early call that we made was that every client space within the building should have a direct connection to nature, which helps people feel relaxed, more comfortable, and improves their healing process. If you're having the worst day of your life, having a coherent entrance and knowing where you're going, especially if you're being chased or stalked, is very important. So that was a key aspect of the design of this project. It needs to provide places for healing support, both for individuals and groups. It needs to engage with its community. It's in a very prominent site in Midtown, and it needs to have active edges and openly engage with the community. That's a hard thing to achieve when also it needs to be so safe and secure and protected, which is why one of the things we'll talk to you about today is the level of glazing on that first floor. Also, obviously, providing enduring architecture for the city and a low energy and future-proof building that's robust, simple, and can stand the test of time. So I'm going to take you through the floor plan very quickly. Again, this is just so you understand what's going on this first floor, which is quite overwhelming when you see it in one complete plan. So I'm going to break it into a few different sections. So the first thing to mention is that, as mentioned, as part of this, the MAPS funding, some of that funding is going towards a future parking garage, which is up here to the west of the site, the top of the page. And that's being developed by Midtown Renaissance. That's got nothing to do with the proposal that you're looking at today, but it is connected, and that's where the parking for this building will be. There's also a proposed mixed-use development that will come in future as well, that's on Park Place. Across the site, there is a grade change of about 13 feet, which is considerable, which is why the main entrance to this building is located in the center to allow that the whole first floor client facilities to be at one continuous single level for ease of access. So as you come into the building, you enter the reception area. This is open and inviting with a glazed front door section, but also some of the waiting area here is hidden and protected. So if you are feeling vulnerable, then there are areas that you can tuck yourself away and hide fundamentally from anyone who could be coming in and out of that building. There's also areas here where you can wait and have direct eyesight of who's coming and going in the building. So depending on your mental state, we've been thinking about all those different feelings that people could be going through as they come into this facility. Then as you come through the security line here, all these blue boxes are the intake rooms. This is where clients are taken and assessed, their needs are assessed, and which partnering agencies they need to meet with are worked out. And then there's partners come from the second floor down to meet these people, meet the clients. All these little pink arrows that you see are windows. And the idea is that there's a courtyard that sits here, and every single intake room has a direct connection to outside. Which we think is very important. The blue dotted line that you see here runs around is a walking path that's internal and external, as a lot of people like to walk and talk during times of crisis. These areas are clustered around these intake lounges, so if people, they could be in these rooms for 1 hour, up to 8 hours. So if they want to come and mingle with other people, there's these lounges in between here to allow them to do that. This is a long corridor that connects all these spaces. There's no denying that, and we're trying to make this building feel as least institutional as possible. So therefore, we're activating these corridors here with the kitchen space for people to meet and get the food and drink that they need, and also a client store. Many users of this facility come with just the clothes on their back, so the client store allows them to get the basic essentials that they need. The yellow area that you see here is the children's sanctuary that's protected from the street, but also has an outdoor safe space as part of the courtyard for kids to play. Then this is where things are getting a bit more complicated. But the orange facility that you see down here, this is a doctor's surgery and a forensic medical clinic. So if you've been sexually assaulted, this is where you will come to be examined instead of having to go to the ER as you do now. The orange area that you see here is a pet sanctuary. So if you are fleeing with your pets, then you can come and they'll be looked after here. Then we have a donations center and storage, and then this utilities yard, which I'll come into in more detail shortly. And then on the corner at a slightly lower level to meet with the street is a community cafe space. The idea this will be run and operated by Palomar and use survivors to actually operate the facility. And that's connected to a community space that sits behind there as well. So there's a couple of views here just of these internal spaces. So the first is this entry space as you come into the building. Moving through, so this is the intake lounge surrounded here at the intake rooms. There's clearly a more domestic feel to these spaces. We've lowered the floor-to-ceiling height slightly, still bringing in natural light. And what you can't see from this image is a connection to the outdoor courtyard just around the corner. But integrating things like fireplaces and bookshelves to, again, make it not feel institutional. This is the kids' sanctuary, introducing fun play elements like slides, and this direct connection out to an outdoor play space. This is the community cafe space on the corner that directly faces out towards Hudson. operated by Palomar staff. Then moving up to the second floor, I won't go into this in a huge amount of detail. This is a partner's floor. Clients do not come up to these spaces. Fundamentally, all pinwheels around this central cafe space, a meeting area, which has a punched facade, which allows for an outdoor terrace. So the staff who work here, who deal with quite traumatic things, have a break space and a view out towards the city. And that's what some of that office space could look like. Then moving up to the third floor, the shared facility of therapy spaces in green that you see here. So clients do come up for counseling services as an ongoing treatment to their initial crisis. And that has a outdoor terrace to the north there. Then there's a community facility, a meeting space so all the partners can meet together for functions and community events as well. And that has a terrace and a view over downtown. And that's what that community space could look like. You've probably noticed from those interior images that the color palette's been very important to the building to make sure that people, there's no trigger colors and people feel relaxed and calm as they enter those spaces, and that's been carefully considered. And that's also reflected on the outside of the building. So the base of the outside of the building is a white brick, so it's robust and safe, and it also signifies sort of new beginnings and cleanliness. Then there's a bands of color above that representing peace and healing, tranquility and growth, and then finally rebirth and renewal as you move up towards the building. And that all plays out against the Oklahoma sky, which we think is really important to consider. This is a corner view of Hudson and Park Place with the community cafe here clearly facing sort of towards Midtown and not to be confused with the main entrance of the building, which is on Hudson. This is a view looking down Hudson on 11th Street at the back there. And then this is a view looking across Hudson to the entry. You can see these punch openings where we have terraces. The building also projects out over Park Place and provide covered terraces because this is south-facing and also has a sort of lean towards the city. These also punched openings also help direct your eye towards the main entrance that's set back from the street. Then zooming in, that's what that main entrance it looks like. And then talking about materials, so the bands of color are proposed to be made from a metal panel, so they're robust and hard wearing. We're proposing that there's some of these panels are gloss and some are matte, so we end up with a dynamic facade that will catch the light and create some movement. And then in between where we have the glazing, we're proposing there is the solid panels of the glazing are clad in a sort of mirrored finish. That's not a bright mirrored finish that may be an issue with birds and things like that. That's a slightly polished mirrored finish, but it will still reflect the sky and blend in with the glazing. So that really reinforces those horizontal colored bands. And then, as I mentioned, the first floor is proposed to be a white brick. So these are the concept elevations as they currently stand. This is the north and south elevation. I'll come on to some of these in a bit more detail. Just quickly.
Could you make sure that you point out the one-story part?
Sure. I've got
yeah, when you get to that. Okay,
absolutely.
Great. Thank you so much.
Just talking about the landscape in a little bit more detail, I'm going to zoom in on these pink dashed boxes. So looking at the entry, the materials for the hardscaping is a standard concrete sidewalk around the perimeter of the building. And then we've slightly elevated those around the entry area to these linear concrete pavers. The sort of low-level planting is proposed to be robust, low maintenance, and native where possible. And it's been carefully selected to make sure there's visual interest throughout the year as well, through all the seasons. And then the trees are of a scale that's appropriate to the street and also large enough to be robust as they'll be standing alone on the sidewalk. And then there's 3 feature trees that sit outside the main entrance to be these maples. To the north and the south, it's a very similar strategy with regards to planting. However, the slight tweak to the species to make sure they can cope with the Oklahoma sun facing south and the shade that will be cast on them to the north. Then a little bit more detail just on the site design. This may be a little tricky to see, but talking about lighting as well and layout. So up here on Park Place, we have the entrance to this service and utility yard. This is also where people will drop off donations. Then on the corner, we have the entrance to the community cafe. All trees around the whole perimeter of the site will be uplit to provide lighting. And then along Hudson, there will also be lighting bollards all the way along to slightly increase the level of lighting needed along the street there. There is a proposal for potentially, as an alternate, some street lamps to be added as well, depending on where we sit with the budget at a later date. And as Laura mentioned, the exterior signage will form a separate application at a later date. The secondary entrance here to the doctor's office and forensic medical centre. And then on the north here, we have a dedicated staff entry point, so there'll be no crossover between police officers, who can be a trigger to some of the people who use this building, and other members of staff. So all three elevations of this building are activating the street. This is just an image showing the street lights. If there's enough money in the budget to be able to do this, we will, and they'll match in with the rest of the street lights in Midtown, and an image of the lighting bollards that are provided. So I'm going to come on to talk a little bit now about setbacks. Laura gave a great introduction to that, but just to say that our site property boundary is out at the edge of the curb line to the south here, which means that we fall foul of the 10-foot setback to the south, and that's because we're allowing for a sidewalk and a planting zone and a seating area outside of the cafe as well. So we're only 10'4" off, so it's very close. And then the south elevation, the entrance areas to the main Palomar facility and the doctor's office are also set back as well. And that's to provide some coverage, but also allow ADA access into the doctor's office because of the change in level. So looking at that elevation in a bit more detail, the blue area is the 2 stories there that fall within the 10-foot setback. And as you can see, the pink areas highlighted below are the areas that are set further back. That equates to 18%, so well within the requirements. And then to the south facade, looking at that, unfortunately 94% of that is set further than 10 foot behind for the reasons that we mentioned earlier. Then moving on to the height requirement, the minimum height requirement. So obviously to Hudson, the main majority of the building is 3 stories tall, so that's completely within the requirement. To the north here, the building is 2 stories at its lowest, so again that meets the requirement. But to the south, where we have this utility enclosures that houses the electrical transformer, backup generator, and the trash, which has to be open air. We're proposing to carry the language of the building across to screen that instead of the conventional screening of just a fence fundamentally. But that means that that's a single-story portion of the building. Also, a key reason for that being lower is because it's south-facing, and we've done lots of studies to make sure there's enough natural daylight getting into the courtyard at the back to make that a really welcoming, inviting space as well. So there's a number of reasons why that's slightly lower than proposed. And then looking at the glazing to the primary elevation, which is to Hudson, that's the first story level highlighted in blue. And that's the area of glazing that we have highlighted in pink proposed. So that's 23% of that first floor being glazed, which doesn't meet the 50% recommendation for glazing there. And that's because of the nature of what happens within this building. Fundamentally, this building, most of those facilities on the first floor need to be incredibly private. So unfortunately, we have to have quite a lot of solid wall there. We've tried to maximize the glazing where possible to make this an open, inviting building. And as Laura mentioned, there's lots of glazing on the floors above to make this fit in with the surroundings. Lastly, just look at rooftop unit visibility. So there are 2 large RTUs that are placed on the roof, and they've been very intentionally placed to make sure that their impact is minimal. So we've done a couple of views here to test the impact. Number 1 is from further up Hudson, and you have to be over 265 feet away before you start to see that rooftop unit. And then the other side of the right-of-way on Hudson, the unit will not be visible. Neither units will be visible. And then looking across, you have to be a considerable distance away before you start to see those units. And then looking from Park Place, again, 200 feet away before you start to see the units. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So as staff, I appreciated all the information they provided. Just to clarify on Hudson, on the setback, the ordinance allows up to 40% can be set back more than 10 feet for things such as the entrance, and that's clearly, you know, where the entrance is, and then they have the ramp and everything. So they don't need a variance for, oh, thank you. They don't need a variance for that, but they will need one for the south, so I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant or any thoughts or comments?
I think it's lovely. I think the importance of safety was definitely well thought out throughout the whole design, the connection to nature that you see in the pedestrian realm, even of what y'all have drawn out landscape-wise, making the entrance ADA. It checks all the boxes for me. I think if there is a project to approve at the Board of Adjustments, I say go for it. It's worth it. Everything that I saw that's a little off, I think is highly justified. So good job.
Yeah. I'd echo those sentiments. Definitely the hat nod to the intentionality of these spaces and how the public will interact with this from an exterior standpoint, and then the most vulnerable of Oklahomans who are going to this space. So we appreciate that. Thank you.
I agree. The detail and the attention that you've given to the design and layout of this is very impressive, and I think something that the community can be very proud of, that this will be a very important addition and will do a very good job in serving the part of the community that will access those services. So job well done. I would then make a motion that we approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District Zoning Ordinance as referenced in section C and D of the staff report, with the conditions that the applicant obtains a variance from the Board of Adjustments from the regulations requiring a minimum height of 2 stories or 30 feet, and from the regulation requiring the first 2 floors to be at or within 10 feet of the street right away.
Copeland second.
Jones Copeland motion. Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we need to bring in anyone?
We have a second motion.
Motion.
Oh, sorry.
And
And then adjustment.
yes, I would make a motion that we approve recommendation for the approval of the Board of Adjustments for a variance from the regulation requiring a minimum height of 2 stories or 30 feet, from the regulation requiring the first 2 floors to be at or within 10 feet of the street right away.
Copeland second.
Okay, Jones Copeland. Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
Actually, they both, wait a minute. No, I think they both have to recuse on this next one, too.
Okay.
Yeah. Pardon? Oh, okay, yeah. You can check, but I'm pretty sure they both
Okay.
need to.
Okay. So they're both recused.
Yes,
Okay.
they are. But we still have a quorum. We have quorum plus 1, so we're good.
Perfect. Okay, so next item for individual consideration is DTCA-23-00061 at 415 Northwest 8th Street, 422 Northwest 9th Street, and 426 Northwest 9th Street.
So the last time we worked on this block was when we did Jimmy's Egg. It came back to you guys several times, but if you haven't gone by, it actually turned out really, really nice. So the proposal before you is literally the rest of the block, as you can see highlighted in yellow. Currently, there is an apartment complex that's on 8th Street that's vacant. most recently used by the Department of Corrections, and 2 houses on 9th Street. The 2 houses on 9th Street, this one was constructed in 1905, and I included some significant information about these. And the one next to it was constructed in, I believe, 1915, and that's a much larger house. I did find information on this one that previously it had been approved. It was turned into a treatment facility, and there's 10 bedrooms in this thing. That's how big it is. But that was actually approved prior to 2007 when this was in the North, what was that called? Northtown Town Urban Design Committee area, which was a long time ago. And there's a side view of the house as you go up. That, the first house is actually occupied, and the guest house in the back is occupied. This one technically is vacant, but I believe it has people inside probably, as this probably does too, and this is a picture of the apartment complex that's on 8th Street. So surrounding this, and this was also kind of exciting when I went out that day, and these were really dark, and I had to lighten them up because it was cloudy and cold. And but there, what you're seeing there is the parking garage on 9th Street. That's across the street to the north that you approved not that long ago. And on the north side of that, on the other side of the alley, is the office building that's being constructed. And so then this is Jimmy's Egg parking lot, which is not included. And currently it's one way. There's a second item on the agenda associated with this project, which is the CE. And one of the things you're going to see is discussion about the fact that this parking lot is not wide enough to have bidirectional access, so it's one way. And the only way that you can exit it currently is through the alley. And so then there's the Jimmy's Egg and the second restaurant that's in that building. And then to the south, you have at Elemental. You guys approved murals that you can see there in that corner, as well as there's a fairly large one-story building that's used by a company also on 8th Street on the south side of the block. And then not that long ago, you had that small apartment building in the upper left before you, and they have finished that project. They're not supposed to have parking there, but I'll take care of that at another time. And then on the corner at Walker and 8th Street, you have a renovated older building that has offices in it. And then across to the west, across Walker, you have St. Anthony complex. So let me go back to, let's see. In your staff report, I included the demolition guidelines. Just as a reminder, these are guidelines, these are not regulations. We request information. They don't have to provide it. It's very helpful if they do provide it. In this case, they did provide some additional information. So in staff's opinion, and I'll stress that, the design quality of the houses is high, and they exhibit unique stylistic components, and there are no similar structures in the immediate vicinity. There used to be a house in between the two of these that looked a lot like this one here, but it was severely damaged in fire. I did find that information, and so was torn down many years ago, as well as all the other residential structures in this area have been torn down over the years. In terms of form, the existing houses are, one could argue this one is smaller, the other one maybe not so much, since it's, I think technically it's considered 2.5 stories tall. But the minimum height for DBD is 3 stories. So on the surface, neither one of those meet the minimum height of 3 stories or 50 feet. They're also set back further from the street than currently permitted because maximum setback's 10 feet, and These are the traditional 20 to 25 feet that you normally would have seen up until 2007, when the Downtown Design District was approved. So as far as significance, staff believes that these two houses are both historic resources defined as sites, district structures, buildings, or monuments that represent important facets of history in the locality, state, or nation. Places where significant or historic events occurred, places associated with a significant personality or group important to the past, as well as they are architectural resources, which is defined in the municipal code as districts, structures, buildings, monuments, sites, and landscaping that possess significant local interest or significant artistic merit, or which are particularly representative of their class or period, or represent significant achievements in architecture, engineering, technology, design, or scientific research and development. These houses were included in Phase 1 of the intensive level survey of downtown, which was done in 2009. This particular one here on the screen, as I said, was constructed in 1905. It's considered Queen Anne style. It appears on the 1906 Sanborn insurance maps. We happen to have those in our office. If you ever want to come look at them, they're really kind of cool to look at. We have the big set. In 1920, the city directory showed that this was the house of Dr. C.F., I don't know how to say this right, Cuny. I Googled him and did find record of him. But then by 41, there's two separate listings indicating that it was probably divided into apartments. And in the 60s and 70s, it was used as, it looks like a daycare, toddlers in nursery. It's once again being used as a house. Now, I indicated in here that the resource identification form included in that 2009 survey stated, due to the accumulation of non-historic alterations, this building is not eligible for listing in the National Register. What I will say, in 2009, when it was done, the front porch was enclosed. I don't know when it was restored back to this, because there is no CA on file indicating that they had gone through that process, but it appears to have a more, its appearance more toward what it was originally. And so since it's more toward the historic condition, staff doesn't agree with that finding in 2009. The larger house next door, constructed in 1915, referred to as American Foursquare. It was vacant in 1906, but it showed up in the 1920 city directory as the residence of Dr. John D. Batson, and I Googled him and I did find a record of him. This house first appeared on the 1922 Sanborn, and it was shown as a single-family house. By 1941, it apparently had been divided and was showing as two listings. And by 1950, there had been a rear addition, and it was divided into apartments. 1964 apparently was used as a nursing home, so it was more commercial use. 2009, it was used for offices, and I think some of those signs might still be on the windows. Once again, the resource identification form indicated the same statement. Due to accumulation of non-historic alterations, this building is not eligible. In staff's opinion, the non-historic alterations noted in the previous survey are minor, easily reversible if not already reversed since the time of the survey, and do not obscure the historic and architectural characteristics of the properties. The structure has not been reevaluated for National Register eligibility since the time of the survey. As rare surviving examples of some of the earliest residential development in Oklahoma City and the architectural styles associated with the era of development, staff believes that both of these houses are eligible for the National Register under criteria A, that are associated with events that have made a significant contribution to the broad patterns of our history, and C, that embody the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction, or that represent the work of a master, or that represent a significant and distinguishable entity whose components may lack individual distinction. As far as structural integrity, the applicant provided field inspection reports They were prepared by a registered construction inspector and a licensed professional engineer. Both of their seals appear on the documents that they submitted. Final recommendations from those reports are for 422, which is that one. It is, and I quote, "It is the opinion of the undersigned that these structures should not be inhabited," and I will remind you, there is someone living in this house, "and pose significant health risks. It is my belief that these structures are high risk to the tenants and neighbors in the area. Further, the structures are in such a state of decay and ruin that they pose an imminent threat to the public health or safety, and demolition of said structures is required to alleviate said threat." As far as 426, and I quote, "The entire structure appears to be hazardous and not suitable for any type of occupancy, and to the best of my knowledge, it is not officially occupied at the present time. It is the opinion of the undersigned that the structure is in such a state of decay and ruin that it poses an imminent threat to the public health or safety, and demolition of said structure is required to alleviate said threat." One of the other criteria that the guidelines recommend could be information provided for is demolition with accompanying proposal for replacement. While specifics of the replacement project is not included in the application, we don't have, it's not part of the CA. It would have to come before you in the future. The applicant has provided the following information. "We are requesting the demolition of these buildings to immediately proceed with creating architectural plans for the 4-story mixed residential building illustrated in the site plan and concept renderings attached," and that was attached in your packet. There is pent-up demand for additional housing downtown, and this development will add somewhere between 303 and 310 apartments, offering a range of studio efficiencies, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and live-work apartments. In summary, the committee may consider any of the demolition criteria, as well as the purpose and intent statements which were included in the staff report, in your decision. Staff believes that these houses are historic and architectural resources as described above. The field inspection reports for both houses state the structures are in such a state of decay and ruin they pose an imminent threat to the public health or safety, and demolition of said structures is required to alleviate said threat. No information was provided about the possibility of repairing these houses. So based on all this information, your recommended roadmap that I have provided for you at the end, so I'm going to recommend that you split them out. Staff has no problem with demolishing the apartment complex at all, and so that is case item A. So we recommend that you have a motion for case item 1A to approve case item 1A on the basis that the project complies with regulation guidelines of Downtown Design District. And we then have two possibilities to address case items 1B, which is the demolition of this house, the smaller house, and case item 1C, which is demolition of the larger house. So the first possibility is, if the committee determines that these structures are historic resources and architectural resources, that the structures do not present an imminent threat to public health and safety, or that the proposed or anticipated future development does not outweigh the loss of these structures, then we would recommend that you deny case items 1B and 1C on the basis, as you see there, the project does not comply. Or another option for those two is, if the committee determines that these structures are not historic resources or architectural resources, that the structures, did I say that wrong? If it determines that these structures, I think I should have said, don't pose an imminent threat to public health and safety, or that the proposed or anticipated future development outweighs the loss of the structures, then your recommended motion would be to approve case items 1B and 1C on the basis that the project complies. So have I confused you now? Okay. When I have multiple choices, I'm trying to be clear about one or the other, or one and the other, so that you don't lose the path. So, and there are representatives here for this application. If you don't have any questions for me.
Before we get to the representative part, have there been any kind of precedent for this body demoing what I would assume to be single family or up to 4 units, 8 units in a downtown business district in lieu of?
So you're asking
Density 300, yeah.
if you've ever had one come before you where you've denied their request to demo? Is that what you're asking?
Or approve?
Well, you've
Either one.
approved several. There's been,
From a residential,
right, not that far from here, in fact, north of here on the corner where the parking garage is being built, there was a small apartment building there. I don't know if it was a 4-plex or an 8-plex.
sure.
That came before you, I think it was earlier this year, but it had structural issues going on.
Okay.
It represented the size, those small apartment buildings that we saw in a lot of locations. One was Memory Lane Apartments, which was before your time on DDRC, that actually had to come to DDRC twice because the first time it was denied. Then the demolition guidelines were created, and then it came back, and that was up at, I think that's 7th and Walker.
Oh.
It was on the west side. Katie might know some of the others. We've had several houses that came before you down in the Strawberry Fields area because of the age of those. Some of them were 100 years old. They were all recommended, they were all approved for demolition in that area.
Yeah. Cottage District goes to Urban Design Commission, but it follows the downtown guidelines, and they've approved demolition of numerous structures there. I think it has always been approved either because of structural issues that were documented or on the basis that the proposed new development outweighed the loss of the structure. I don't recall us approving one because this isn't dense enough and we want more density. I don't recall that specifically, although you could kind of lump that in with a proposed development outweighing the loss of the structure.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Once again, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. I have 2 other people that are going to speak with me. Richard McCown, who would be the would-be developer if we're able to get approval here today, and then Tim Johnson. Tim Johnson is a civil engineer, and he owns Johnson Associates, the firm that we hired to make a review of the structural integrity of these 2 homes. So, as staff mentioned, there's a couple paths when it comes to demolition. We're actually going to ask you to take 2 of the paths. One being that what we are going to propose is going to outweigh the loss of this, but more importantly, and I think more fundamentally, is these structures are massively problematic. So when we first set out to look at this application, the first call was to Tim Johnson. We wanted him and his team to get his eyes on it. If you look at the way that the regulations read, one of those paths is the structural integrity. And what it says is, the structure, which has not otherwise been declared a public nuisance by the City Council, poses a threat, an imminent threat to the public health or safety, and the demolition of said structure is required to alleviate said threat. Now, the other important thing it does in the next subsection is, on the burden of proof, it puts the burden on the applicant. And so that is why in your report, and what you'll hear today, Mr. Johnson has provided a thorough review, placed his seal on it, to meet that burden, that we have satisfied the elements in the ordinance that the City Council deemed necessary when we're going to talk about demolition. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Mr. Johnson to walk through his analysis, unless there are questions of me.
Any questions? Okay.
Good morning. Tim Johnson with Johnson Associates. By way of qualifications, I'm a graduate structural engineer from Cal Poly Pomona, California. I've been practicing as a civil engineer since 1981, licensed in the state of Oklahoma and 12 other states. Tim Meltebarger is a construction inspector that has worked for me 25 years. We celebrated that last Friday. And he is one of the few registered construction inspectors in the state of Oklahoma. And he has actually taught the classes at OSU OKC for building inspection for residential houses. So by way of qualification, that's Tim and I's credentials. So we did spend considerable time reviewing both these houses. We walked through every inch that I could get to. Tim crawled up a few ladders that I wouldn't crawl up. And sadly to say, this house we're looking at right now on at 422, it has a very small root basement that is not protected from the outside. It doesn't have a locking door. It has water that drains to it. And it appears in a fairly long inspection of that area that some Band-Aid work had been done maybe 5-6 years ago, where they came in and they patched a few mid-floor supports inside and underneath the crawl space. But unfortunately, it has a shallow foundation. Much of the shallow foundation around the house has been exposed to the weather and continues to be exposed to the weather. There were several holes that have been dug along the perimeter of the house, I think by the animals that live there, but they've not been put back and protected. I'm not a code expert, but I do sit on the council's code committee for the IBC and IEC and IFC, and have for 20 plus years. From a code perspective underneath, the electrical and the heat and air are a disaster. There had been some work under there that would indicate that they were trying to better ventilate the water heater and the floor heater, but there's still a lot of negative ventilation, a lot of things that are just duct taped together and wired together. There's a lot of exposed wiring and extension cords that were used for conduit or Romex in that area. So, in looking at the floor supports, this particular unit had a lot of dry rot and water damage around the perimeter of the building as well as under the floor joists, mostly on the south end. The south end of the building is the most exposed to weather due to the added-on porch. There's a set of stairs that go out of a back door that are inaccessible. As I mentioned, the drainage away from the building is not positive. The building itself, as it is divided, is cumbersome from accessibility standpoint. The bathrooms, the kitchen sink, the laundry room are all makeshift. They appear to be again, put together with bubble gum and Band-Aids. A code inspection, it would not pass. The smells and odors of the mold that are in the building were just overwhelming. And that's why in this one, I strongly would recommend it not be inhabited. I don't think it's healthy to live there. It has a separate detached garage with an apartment that exists in the attic area of the garage. The garage was, and you can see by the pictures in my report, the garage was pretty full of items and some of the ceiling had fallen down. So it wasn't truly accessible to all the perimeter on the inside, but on the outside, it's a very similar condition. A much shallower foundation that was used for garages back then exists, and there's again the non-positive flow of water away from the building. There's a lot of settlement. We joked about the marble test. There's a marble test. You drop a marble on the floor and see where it goes. In this case, on that second level floor, they would have gone everywhere. It was just a lot of movement in the foundation, a lot of heave in the middle that were more stable and away from the wet weather, causing the bow. Most of the walls were unlevel. It was hard to get pictures of it, but they'd been patched up and painted recently. All the heat and air were window units and floor and standing heater units fed by gas. Not a healthy condition without ventilation. And we also looked at this as, could it be transferred? The house has been added onto several times, and I don't think that this unit, without much demolition, could be moved. I think what would be left to be moved would be a very small front floor plate of that 1 and 2 story front piece. On the second building, as staff has mentioned, it's a bigger house. It has probably a 3/4 basement in it, has a better foundation around the perimeter of the house, except for where the addition was put on. It's not stable. The brick foundation around the addition is not stable. You can see the movement in the siding on this picture. There's movement of the bay window where it has settled in that northwest corner. Most of the doors around that side are inoperable. It had, along the south side, it's almost a shiplap ladder that would take you as a fire escape from the 3rd floor. Obviously an afterthought. The 3rd floor was never intended to be occupied. And so the 3rd floor, when it was added onto, it appeared that there was not any increase in floor joist strength in the building, and there's settlement in the roof ceiling on the 2nd floor. We did speak to the gentleman that had occupied it as a law office last, and it was his stuff that was in there stored. I would say that if we were to somehow be able to manage or measure the capacity of the stuff that is stored in there, it far exceeds the floor loading that it was designed for as a residential home. And again, we looked at this. There was a lot of dry rot in the basement. The basement was moist. It needed ventilation that it didn't have. Obviously, when it was used as a nursing home, there had been some commercial electric brought in. A fairly hefty commercial panel was down in the basement, but it was completely exposed. It was open, wires that were running to boxes with no lids on them, splayed out from the boxes. It was partially rigid conduit, which would have been required to meet the commercial criteria of the nursing home or the office. But there was also a combination of older paper wrap Romex that was in the house. So in our opinion, again, not stable. To maintain this as a livable house, it would take a complete strip down to the foundation and a rebuild, in our opinion. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah. Any questions for the applicant?
Thank you.
Thank you. Sir.
Did you have a question? No. Oh, thank you.
Is there anyone else in the gallery that wants to speak on this item?
I think the potential developer
okay.
was also mentioned that he was going to, there was a rendering that was included in your packet and a written statement from them. And I'm going to relocate so I can see what he's showing you guys.
Richard McCowan, 6501 North Classen, Suite 1A, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. I'm kind of nervous to be up here. I've been really lucky with the downtown developments that we've done over the last 12 years. We've had greenfield sites. We built the Level urban apartment community, mixed-use building in Deep Deuce. Built our second building across the street from it. We call it Mosaic. It's got a wonderful little Willow coffee shop on the ground floor. And then we built the Bower apartments, and all of them didn't have anything that had to be removed. And it was good. It's really good. And then we got a chance to do a historic preservation project in Bricktown with the 5-story Rock Island Plow building, also a 1905 structure. And that also was really lucky because the building was essentially an empty shell. And we built a brand new building hiding inside of the Rock Island Plow. And I really, really love new construction. I'm part of the Ideal Homes family. And we are aggressive pioneers in energy efficient construction. And that's part of what really attracted me to start working downtown, because you could do so many interesting things in terms of walkability and building great buildings that had a lot of efficiency built into them. Some of the challenges you get into with old buildings is when you start trying to make them energy efficient. Very often in a mixed humid climate like we live in, especially buildings with crawl spaces, you accelerate the rotting, the mold, the condensation, moisture. They're really scary. I also want to tell you that we did a ton of conceptual designing on the site, trying to figure out how to work around these buildings. If you look at this site plan, the buildings that we're talking about set up here in this area, and we really did a lot of studies looking at what if the alley stayed in place, could we wrap around them and make them work? Not only did it create a really awkward piece of city, but it made this project completely unfeasible. Never would happen. The other thing that's really important about this site is it allows for a wrap style building. So what do I mean by that, a wrap style building? When we first built the level apartments, we were thinking about building 4 podium buildings on that city block, where you park underneath and then stack the building on top. And a really interesting general contractor from Tennessee said, why don't you build a wrap? And I'm like, what's a wrap? That's like a sandwich and a tortilla, right? And he said, no, really, take a look at this. He goes, you can build a parking garage, it's completely concealed, and we wrap the building around it, and you end up with a really good piece of city, and it's so much more efficient to build. That led us on a really interesting adventure. We started looking at wrap buildings in North Texas, also Kansas City, to really get an understanding of what those buildings do and how they function. So we built Level. Building was transformative to the neighborhood. There had been 17 brownstones started just north of us on 3rd Street, and it took 4 years to sell the first 4 of those brownstones. A really difficult product. So Level gets built, and all of a sudden 300 people are living in the neighborhood, going to the restaurants, making it a place that you wanted to be. And once that happened, the rest of those brownstones started to sell. Our investment brought, the courage for the Aloft Hotel to come and continue to transform the neighborhood. It's been really exciting. Well, the second building we built is Podium Building. Didn't have a choice. The piece of land was only 130 feet wide, so we had to tuck the parking underneath. The hard construction cost was 40% higher. And I can walk you through that in great detail. But the reality is podium buildings are incredibly limiting. So if you think about the things we're going to be talking to you about today, closing part of the alley and also allowing us to remove these older homes, allow us to build a really great building that's a great piece of city. One of the examples of a podium building that doesn't necessarily make a great piece of walkability, and I don't like being critical of another product or project here in town, but if you will go with me in your imagination up to 4th Street and walk down next to Maywood, Phase 1 and Phase 2, where Black Walnut and Gray Sweater are, thank you, you're walking next to just a blank wall. There's no activity on the street. It's just parking garage. And it really doesn't make for good urbanism. Well, why is that? Why is the podium building so difficult? And it's simple math. Our blocks are you have 140 feet you can work from the alley to the right-of-way, and a parking garage is 124 feet. So that leaves you 16 feet left to work with to build some kind of usable building that can face the street. But you also need a hallway to be able to, move people back and forth. You can't just walk from the garage straight into the back of a building. It's a fire code problem. So the hallway takes up another 6 feet. So you have 10 feet of buildable area. And that's why we see these podium-style buildings don't allow for an active street edge. Another example of, this is the 3rd Street or the 2nd Street lofts between Oklahoma and Broadway. And that, it's a long blank wall, just a concrete wall, and all the retail is up above your head. Well, we officed in our shipping container project for 8 years. And we got to look out the big windows and watch people coming and going from Level. And Level is I'm so proud of that building. And I just got so lucky that it was our first property to do downtown. But 27 of the apartments that wrap around Level actually come down and touch the sidewalk. You have a patio with stairs and a little gate, and they go right out onto the sidewalk. And it creates this incredible active street edge. And in fact, the people who live there never want to move out. They stay on average twice as long as everyone else in the community. We were looking yesterday, most of the folks who live in those 27 apartments have been there more than 4 years. We have some that have been there as long as 8, and then we have 2 that are coming up on 9 and 10. They're like Muppets on Sesame Street. They're the people who make our community. They become the characters. I was one of those Muppets when we officed across the street. I miss being down there, but we had to move to a bigger office. All that said, we have a deep commitment, and that's why I want to show you a couple of renderings. Every single apartment that comes down and touches the ground will have a walk-up entry. And we're doing something a little bit different. We're flipping the apartments to back them up back to back so that we don't have the balconies come out as often in these regular intervals the way they do at Level. They'll be spaced slightly farther apart, and then they'll be coupled together. And what we're wanting to accomplish there is some ideas around Scandinavian architecture. I had a chance about 18 months ago to visit Sweden and Denmark and the Netherlands looking at urbanism. I was over there with a landscape architect, doctor of living architecture. We were studying living architecture throughout these northern European countries, and specifically multimodal transportation. In fact, we're applying for, with some Swedish architects, a grant to further bring some of their bicycle-friendly techniques to this project, to build on the investment Oklahoma City's made in all different kinds of transportation. But it really does start with making it incredibly convenient for somebody to just walk right out onto the street. So, where we're at today, the next step, if you would like to give us permission to go start spending a tremendous amount of money on deeply developing these into architectural plans, that's where we're at. We really believe in this location, this project. We believe in the ability of buildings like this to be transformative to the neighborhood. Other examples are certainly, if you look at the Edge and what it's done for the retail around the Edge, if you look at the Metropolitan, which is kind of an unfolded wrap-style building, and how much that stimulated the retail already in place on 8th and 9th, and then we've seen the Parlor and the 8th Street Market pop up. We believe this building will really have a tremendous boost in business to the existing retailers, and will probably encourage new retailers and restaurants to come to the area. I wish I didn't have to be here to ask you to give us permission to remove these old houses. We really want to build this building and continue to see Oklahoma City continue to grow and thrive. I guess there's one other thing that I feel like I should share with you. Norman is going through its comprehensive land use plan update, and I'm the chairman of the housing committee working on this. So I've been looking at a lot of the numbers lately. I've been looking at, over the last 15 years, the amount of urban infill that has happened in the heart of Oklahoma City is roughly around 6,000 housing units that have been added. We may have about 8,500 people living in downtown Oklahoma City. Well, over that last 15-year period, there have been roughly 6,000 single-family detached houses added in the suburbs. Not the suburbs of Oklahoma City, but the whole metro, right? That's 90,000 single-family detached houses compared to right around 6,000 that have been added to downtown. So we've only added 6% of our housing stock, or in other words, 93 to 90, 92 to 93, 94% of the housing has been out in the suburbs. It's really hard, really, really hard to do urban infill. The margins are really, really thin. We found a product that works, that we can really make it work and really add a great piece of city back to the heart of the city. Several years ago, our chapter of the Urban Land Institute was doing one of our peer city trips where we go visit. We've been to San Antonio and Fort Worth and Austin and Kansas City, Northwest Arkansas. So we were in Kansas City, and the former director of downtown Seattle had moved to Kansas City a few years earlier, and he was sharing with us that most cities outside of New York, Boston, and San Francisco, all of the other cities, including Seattle, could count on bringing about 2% of the SMA to live downtown. And he said, here we are in Kansas City, and we've got 2.4 million people, so we feel like we can get 44,000 people living downtown. So, I'm sitting there doing the math. Here we are, Oklahoma City, we're at 1.4 million in our SMA. That means we can get 28,000 people living downtown. So here we are at about 8,500, round numbers, that's 20,000 to go. I know 303 apartments doesn't go a long way toward adding 20,000, but to make our downtown really vibrant, to make it become what we want it to be, we need a lot more of these. I mean, we need 20,000 more people living downtown. So with that, happy to answer any questions. Really, wish didn't have to ask you to do this, but really excited about this project and really, really looking forward to, if you'll give us permission, going and spending a lot of money with some very talented architects so we can come back in front of you here in a few months and show you a much more advanced version of what we've got here today.
Any questions for the applicant?
No, I actually like to say that I like the project.
Is your microphone on? Sorry.
Yes.
It is? Okay.
Oh, sorry, it's covered. Warm. I like to say that I really like your project. I tour these homes all the time, and they're not really a place to be inhabited by a lot of people. I agree with your civil engineer. And a lot of these homes take up an awful lot of space that can be utilized in a better way that you've finally provided for my liking. So I would agree to the proposal.
And I also agree. Looking at the report and the photos, I don't think it's important for us to preserve buildings that are unsafe, especially when something wonderful and safer is coming in. So that's kind of where I am on this.
There was mention of the Queen Anne style architecture and the Foursquare architecture. I think that if we were in risk of losing those types of architecture, we might have a little bit of a different conversation, but I know that there's definitely those types of homes to the west in Clawson-Tenpin, northwest in Gatewood, to the north in Heritage and Mesta. So I definitely think that living in unhabitable, unsafe environments are It's obviously not great. And I think really the only question I have is there a reason why there's 4 stories versus 5 or 6 or 7 or 8?
So I'm glad you asked that question. And if we could make the numbers work to push it up to 5 stories, that'd be kind of exciting. What happens is you go to fire-treated lumber, and it pushes the total cost of the property up over, it's more than 10%. There's several other things in terms of wage rates for, it's so complex going from that 4-story to 5-story that we'd probably be looking at maybe something closer to a 12 to 15% cost increase. Right now, the 1,000 square foot 2-bedroom apartment here is going to be, a $2,100 a month kind of rent. Pushing it to a podium building, for example, where we would park underneath and then, go to 4 stories on top. So essentially a 6-story building would push that same rent for the same 1,000 square foot to $3,000 a month. Or $3 a square foot. If we went to Red Iron, and we'd probably be looking at a $4,000 a month kind of rent. And that's just not where Oklahoma City rents, we just can't support it. And so 4 stories is really, really a wonderful thing. Interestingly enough, I've traveled a lot lately, and my youngest child has been in Italy for this last semester and trying to get on a flight home today. And we got to go visit, and we went to Rome and Venice and Milan and then back to Florence, where she is. I was really surprised how 3, 4, and 5-story the Italian cities are. And I was shocked to see how many 3-story buildings that there were, especially when you get outside. The core of the most touristy areas, lots of 3-story buildings and plenty of 4-story buildings as well. But there is something so comfortable about, that height. Just even, the day you want to choose to take the stairs from a health standpoint and say, hey, I maintain my fitness without totally breaking a sweat. The 4-story building really invites itself to lots of those kinds of things. So anyway, I think we'll be very happy with how it relates to all the other buildings, especially the 1-story buildings on the corner, which are cherished. The new Banh Mi restaurant, along with Jimmy's Egg, and then of course Elemental. I think the 4-story will really marry well to the existing architecture that hopefully is going to be there for many years to come. That there is one other moment, right as I needed that picture, David took it away, but it's okay. We're actually allowing, in the property we're purchasing, the site that's being preserved here is wide enough for future expansion of their driveway to be a true 26-foot wide, 2-way driveway. So we've accommodated all that in the purchase. So whenever we're writing contracts, we always do this kind of intense, detailed study. Sorry for the long answer.
And I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that last thing, because we had actually talked about the potential for widening the Jimmy's Egg parking lot, having bi-directional access so it doesn't rely on the exit through the alley, although the alley is where they get their trash picked up. But that would actually allow them to end up probably with some more parking spaces coming in and out of there off of 8th Street. So,
Thank you.
So just as a reminder, as you guys are headed towards, staff is recommending the very first motion be about case item 1A, which is the apartment complex, which we have no problem having you tear down. And we have the wording for that. Then to address case items 1B and 1C, based on the comments from at least a couple of you who indicated they support it, what I wanted to remind you is I left a word out. So if you're going to read that, which happens to be on the top of page 13, in the second phrase, between structures and pose, put don't in there.
Laura, I think it actually is supposed to say,
Are you
the
serious?
structures pose an imminent threat.
But
We're approving the demolition because the structures pose an imminent threat.
Oh, wait
That's
a
what that
minute.
means.
You are correct.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I looked at that
Okay.
totally wrong. Inc.
So, for
Thanks.
clarification, because I was getting ready to make motions, I was not even going to read that statement because I didn't think it was necessary for the actual motion that needs to be made for our approval, correct?
Oh, you're saying you weren't
Right.
going to read the statement in
No.
bold?
No, I was not, because I didn't think it was necessary for the actual motion that need to be approved by the actual board.
You're correct.
Oh,
That-
you're correct, yes.
Yep,
I'm
that
so
is
sorry.
Leading
That-
into the recommended motion. And you are free to reference
Any-
the criteria that you think are applicable as part of the motion, if you want.
Thank
You can
you,
always make your own motion, as you know.
as I do know. But you do such a good job with the work of the combined team, I will not play with that. So you guys had me at density because I know the need for housing in the Oklahoma City metropolitan area, especially in the downtown area. So I am going to make a motion that we approve case item 1A on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in section C of the staff report.
Brad Jones' motion. A second? Okay, Trujillo, second. Okay, motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then, do you need to do the 1A, or
Yes, to approve the case items 1B and 1C. And again, I don't think that the sites meet the requirements for historic resources or architectural resources, and that they do propose an imminent threat to public health and safety. So I would make the motion that we approve case item 1B and 1C on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in section C and D of the staff report.
Jones' motion? Trujillo, second. Okay, that motion also passes.
Thank you.
Okay.
And
We
we'll
bring it back
pause,
anybody?
we're going to pause for just a second
Bring it back one or two?
because we get both of them back
All
for
right.
this item.
I feel terrible. It was almost like, why did you guys show up?
I'm not sure how I want to take that.
Positively, because you guys are so engaged in this innovative, creative expansion of new sites within Oklahoma City. Congratulations and great job.
Okay. Next, we have item number 7, other business. So we have 2 on the agenda, CE-01112 at 1400 North Robinson Avenue.
So this was actually on your agenda previously, but so it was on the published agenda, then got withdrawn before the meeting. So it's back before you now. And just as a reminder, a project called The Hub received your approval for this block. It does not include the apartment building in the middle on the south, which is the lofts, and it does not include the building in the northwest corner of the block, but it includes everything else. So June 15th, 2023, you had a hearing on DTCA 22-00085 for the Hub, and there were A through G conditions. And one of those conditions was that they needed to, prior to the issuance of a building permit for the parking garage, which was going to span over the right-of-way for the alley, they needed to apply for a CE from the city to close the alley and approval in district court to vacate the alley. And it just indicated that the CE application would come back to DDRC for a recommendation to the Planning Commission. What I will note is, I haven't been able to officially issue the CA for this project because one of your conditions, they needed to make some revisions on the facades, and they needed to come back to us. So I'm assuming they're kind of lining up all the pieces, and we'll end up with that at some point here. So you usually hear the same concerns from us when people come forward to close alleys, and we're going to discuss this on this one, and we'll discuss it on the next one. And a lot of that, one of our main concerns deals with back-of-house uses. Where is the back-of-house use going to go? And that was discussed previously. But obviously, since you've already approved the CA, they've got to close and vacate this alley so that that project you've approved can be built. So the site plan you approved with DTCA 22-00085 showed the construction of the parking garage over the current platted and constructed north-south alley. Previously, the applicant had stated it is the intention to allow free public access through the first floor of the garage structure along the path of the alley. This would allow for residents from the garage lofts, that building on the south, to access 14th Street as well as keep the passage for two-way traffic. I think what happened when this was on your agenda previously for the CE, they still had some issues to work out with that development as far as access goes. So staff is making a recommendation that you provide a recommendation of approval to the Planning Commission for the request to close the right-of-way for a portion of the north-south alley located south of Northwest 14th Street and east of North Robinson Avenue. And, sorry, I should have clicked through here so you could see them easier. There were several alleys on this block that had been closed previously, some other applications, but the piece we're talking about is what's showing up in green. And that's the view of it from 14th Street. So the block, the majority of the block is vacant now, and these are the two buildings that are on the block that are not involved with this project. I'm really looking forward to this one coming because that little building will be cool if somebody comes forward to renovate that. Richard's still here. Richard, there's a good building for you to work on. And this is just some views from across the street of that neighborhood, which is not in the Downtown Design District. So I will note that the original Downtown Design District stopped halfway in the block, but when they came in and rezoned for this project to SPUD, even though the SPUD did not come before you for a recommendation, that SPUD document references that they have to go through the design review process. So essentially, they rezoned it into the Downtown Design District. So there are representatives here. We have the attorney who has almost every single item on the agenda today. Except one. So he has 4 of the 5. So now I'm feeling like the Planning Commission now.
Almost we don't know who this guy is.
Hi, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. So this application, as staff mentioned, is part of the application you already approved. This will allow this development to move forward. It took a while to get here. We wanted to make sure we were in agreement with the owners and managers of the loft apartments. We are now in that position. So staff now has no alternative paths on this recommendation. It's just flat out approval. We couldn't agree more.
He doesn't get that very often.
I don't.
Perfect.
I also never get support. So I had a room full of supporters here with me today. It's great.
Okay, any questions? Are there anyone in the gallery to speak on this? Okay. Am I entertaining a motion?
I'll make a motion that we recommend approval to the Planning Commission for the request to close the right-of-way for a portion of the north-south alley located south of Northwest 14th Street and east of North Robinson Avenue.
Okay, Jones' motion. Okay, and please vote. Motion for recommendation or for Passes. How about that? Went blank there. Okay.
Before you say it.
See you guys.
Pause for a minute, yes.
I gave up my quota earlier.
Okay. Other business CE-01115 at 415 Northwest 8th Street.
Okay. We're back to the same block that we looked at a couple of cases ago. Jimmy's Egg is in that block. So their request is to close, not all, but most of that alley. And so this is approximately the location of where it would go to. I might be a little too far to the east, but you can see here's the current parking lot in the Jimmy's Egg building. And they commented that they're keeping out enough room so that the parking lot can be widened, and so obviously I might not have gone. But the interesting thing I found when I went in there was, and you can't tell because it has green over it, the alleys are brick. And there might still be a lot of brick alleys around. I don't know. I had just never noticed that before. So this view is looking from Walker East. So that big house that was on the case for demolition is off there on your left. And then this is at the opposite end. So I'm standing over closer to Jimmy's Egg and I'm looking west down the alley. And so their parking lot is off to the left, their dumpster's off to the left. And so, you know, obviously this is how the garbage truck has to get in. And the proposal that you will eventually see when they submit for their CA is they will keep the alley open because that's also going to provide access to the future development to the parking garage. So, and then that's looking in the Jimmy's Egg. You've seen most of these pictures on the other one, and then we have the Jimmy's Egg building. But let me go there is probably the best one. So, going back to here. A verbal description of the apartment project was included, and a potential rendering, and you actually saw that in a presentation on that last item for the demolition. And the project would span the alley, requiring the closure and subsequent vacation of the majority of that alley. They've also talked about they're going to be relocating utilities, and that's exciting to me because, you know, yes, you have to relocate the sewer and the electric, but they're not only relocating the electric, it's going to go underground. Oh. That right there is, I've worked places where electric had to go underground, and we don't have that requirement here. So having a developer willing to do that is very exciting because the visibility just totally changes when you get those overhead electric lines out of your line of sight. The Jimmy's Egg parking lot and building is going to remain, so I'm just going to stress that. That is not involved in any of the projects that we're currently talking about. While alleys have traditionally provided access to back-of-house functions such as delivery, pickup, trash collection, et cetera, which are activities not desired for street frontage, the developer has indicated to staff that the proposed project will provide for these functions within the parking garage. And I was very happy to hear that. So they're talking about where they're going to pick up the trash, that's where the deliveries are going to go. There's also going to be, Richard can correct me if I'm wrong, but there will be additional access to the parking garage from 8th Street. And he can clarify that when he gets up there to do his thing. So staff recommends approval with the following condition. We have on a few occasions had conditions on CEs. This is the same type of condition we had. We had a couple of them a few years ago on South Walker, which were in blocks that were on the west side of Scissortail Park. where they came in to close the alley, and we had this condition as well. So we're recommending approval with the condition that the owner-developer provide for access to back-of-house functions internal to the development on the site plan for future development required to be submitted to the downtown design, for the downtown design district approval.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you. Any,
So, and Richard can correct me if I'm wrong about that other, the access for the deliveries and the trash and all that other stuff.
You're correct. Richard McCown, 6501 North Classen. David told me I could, 2 minutes. I won't take that long. The main entry to the garage will be here off of 8th Street. And then the primary entrance and exit, but from the service standpoint, for trash collection, move in, move out, there is a really neat opportunity to create a high ceiling in this component. We just visited a really exciting new neighborhood, or a new building very similar to this in Tulsa, and confirmed they were doing the exact same thing. So anyway, that's what's going on there.
okay,
I'll shut up.
thank you. Questions for staff?
Oh, I thought you said you had a question for staff.
Oh, no, just ask if
Okay,
there were
no
questions for staff. Okay, any questions for the applicant?
If there are not any, then I will provide that we approve making a recommendation to the Planning Commission for the request to close the right-of-way for a portion of the east and west alley located in the block bounded by Northwest 9th Street on the north, North Hudson Avenue on the east, Northwest 8th Street on the south, and North Walker Avenue on the west, with the condition that the owner-developer provide for access to back-of-house functions internal to the development on the site plan for future development required to be submitted for the downtown design district approval.
Okay, Jones motion.
Second.
Okay, please vote. Okay, motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Next item on the agenda is item 8, communications. There are 5 items under administrative approval report. Are there any comments from planning department and staff?
I'm trying to remember what was on there.
Sorry, I'm just moving right along here.
Well, just one of these is the Paramount Building, that they had gotten approval for some of the work they wanted to do on the east facade, but they had not done it, and it expired. So now there's a new management company, and they came forward with some of those windows to replace and provided me with the information I needed. So I haven't been by to see, but I'm excited for them to actually get started on the east facade of the building. And other than that, I mean, there's just some small things.
Okay.
And I guess I should say Laura Griggs Planning Department, since I totally forgot to do that earlier in the meeting. But I'll just morph on into, yes, we have a meeting in January.
Yep.
I have items on the agenda.
Okay.
So, check your schedule. We probably won't send you a reminder till maybe, I'll probably send it out this week. A lot of people will be gone next week, and don't want you to lose sight of that. Thank you all for showing up today. I was getting really worried about quorum. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Any comments from committee members before closing, or any questions for staff on those administrative approval items?
Yes, Tony and Eric, y'all got to do a better job coordinating this stuff so we don't have this much work in one meeting.
Any other items or comments? Well, hope you guys have a happy holiday. And our next regular committee meeting is Thursday, January 18th, 2024. New applications were to be submitted to staff by 4 p.m. on Tuesday, December 19th, 2023. Revisions and information on continued projects are to be submitted by December 27th, 2023. Thank you all for your participation. Happy holidays. Meeting adjourned.